Recording's sake, I'm Josh Eckhart-Lee, the Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development. Jack Turner, in engineering, our environmental coordinator. David Dayton, our energy coordinating consultant and all-around genius. We've walked folks through in the last two public forums that we've done on this, on the sort of why and wherefore. A lot of sort of background and history is familiar to folks. The sort of increasing threat to our grid, the sort of planning that we've done for the master plan and the MVP workshops that got us to this point. It's not just reflect thin air. You've been with us the last 10 months, everyone in this room. So you know exactly where we are. We're in the sort of final stage where we have a feasibility study in both regular and large print on the table next to the cheese. And it's been on town@milton.org/microgrid for the last 10 days. We'll spend the next sort of weeks upcoming after this meeting finalizing it based off of sort of conversation in this room and any feedback we get from the online report. We know what microgrids are. We've explained them in our previous meetings. We know the sort of virtual microgrid system that is being proposed here and why they're important. The sort of early stages of this report, when we last met, we had just completed our energy audits, which determined the sort of load that Town Hall, that Winter Valley, that the police station drew from the grid in their current configurations, their current use, to figure out how much solar power and battery storage we needed to put on those sites. We found that they all have enough space available for either parking lots, rooftops, or open space for solar to meet almost all of their needs, including at police station, room for a sort of oversized system to help encourage a community shared solar system if we want to do that in the future. Minor energy efficiency potential out there, but that's not been sort of baked into our pro formas. So we're taking the load we expect now into our sort of modeling for the future. And this is the cover of the report on the table over there. Some of the big headline numbers, we want to install just over 400 kilowatts of solar power across the canopy at the parking lot behind Town Hall, at the roofs and open space in the parking lot at Milton PD, and along most of the rooftops at Winter Valley. At all of these stations, we'll put additional battery energy storage, which are about the size of that table, a little bit shorter across all of those sites so that they can store their own power that they generate on site. Seems big. We sort of did the classic retail thing where it's 1,999,000 rather than 2 million even is the total cost, but the vast majority of that can be offset through existing incentive systems and loans. So just about 80% is already covered. That leaves about 400,000 in our resilience gap. Is how we're framing our sort of shortfall that will need to be made out through grant money, which may be more tricky to access given last week's vote, or direct capital funding through TPA. That's the high level. Sort of want to turn it over to David just to talk us through the details of what is going to happen at each site or what is proposed at each site. Nothing is set in stone. It's going to happen. They have why.
Front, look, please.
Yes.
So you always start by trying to find out the most space available for solar power. That's always a challenge, especially in cities. A little less so out here, but when we work in Chinatown and Chelsea, it's tough to find enough space for a lot of solar power. So we're lucky here, as Josh says, that we can supply most of the energy of each building with the solar power. So that's really the only criterion. We just bid as much solar as we can, and partly for the sake of the buildings, and partly because we want to maximize the replacement of fossil fuels with renewables, right? So we maximize the solar. And as Josh says, in this, we oversize that one, we have one opportunity to sort of oversize the solar beyond the needs of the building itself. And then that addition, which would be about that increment of about 452 kilowatts, we can make part of a community solar program. And we haven't built that community solar design yet into what we're doing, but it's part of the next phase of work. The community solar program, as you know, has solar placed wherever we can fit. That solar power goes into the grid. We're not stringing new wires or anything, but the grid agrees to give credits on the bills of folks who we want to have the benefit of that solar. So especially low-income folks. And the Massachusetts regulations provide that the developer of solar, community solar plants gets a premium for allocating at least 50% of their output to low-income folks. So that's the community solar program that we want to work on in the next phase. Yeah, so let's see how to go next. Page narrow. Yeah. Now the BESS, of course, stands for Battery Energy Storage System. I've actually got a little innovation that we'll bring out sometime called BESS the Bus. And it's a bus that is just a big battery on wheels. And it drives around to facilities that have smaller batteries. When they get discharged, it can fill them up. So it's like a fuel oil delivery truck, right? Only it's delivering electricity instead of fuel. So I've got some pictures of that, which I'll share with you. I want to do that next. Anyway, the size of the battery is not set as solar, it's constrained by space. The size of the battery is set by what's the electric load, the demand of all of the appliances and lighting and heating and ventilating and other electricity uses in each facility. So we have to have a battery that's big enough to cover the probable maximum demand, electric demand in that building. And that's how we size the battery. So we said it meets the current monthly maximum coincident electric demand, which just means all the uses line up differently statistically. So
4 hours a day or?
It's for the peak during the year. Yeah, that's a really good question. So during the day, the demand will vary a lot, right? So in the summer afternoon, at 4 o'clock, it may peak. Maybe at 6 o'clock when people start cooking, it'll peak. And so we have to find what those peaks are and make the battery big enough so it can supply the total need of that building at that peak moment. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Now, the next question is for how long, right? So it's one thing to supply the need for a few minutes, but if we want real resilience, we'd like to supply that need over a much longer period of time. That's expensive. The cost of the battery varies mostly with those hours. So a 10 kilowatt battery that lasts for 1 hour is half as expensive almost as a 10 kilowatt battery that lasts for 2 hours. So it scales with the length of time that we can supply that load. And that means if we really want resilience in an extended outage, we have to depend on the solar panels recharging the batteries, right? Hi.
Good evening.
Come in.
Thank you.
Plenty of space.
Space minutes. Appreciate it.
So we're just talking about batteries and how we size them. So the cost of that battery gets higher and higher as its ability to supply the load in the building gets longer. So for an extended outage of the grid, one thing that helps, of course, is we've got solar panels on that building. So the solar panels keep recharging the battery. If the sun stays out and we have enough panels, the battery would go on through a whole outage. But it's probably not the case in most facilities, so we'll need a backup generator. And as much as possible, we'll make those generators fueled by green fuel. So biodiesel if they burn oil, landfill gas that we can store and compress if they burn gas. And there's a growing industry in biofuels, so it's not a perfect solution, but it would give us resilience over a long period of time. And then if we can use the best bus, then the best bus goes out to a larger solar field, right? Charges up, drives into the city and recharges. And then we've got a renewable solar powered source of resilience for that building. So that's the story with the building, with the batteries. At the town hall, the peak is probably less than 54 kilowatts, so that's a size that's available. At the police department, more like 40 kilowatts. And then at Winter Valley, for the first 4 buildings, about 54 kilowatts. Those peculiar numbers are that right now we can see batteries available in those sizes. A year from now, it'll change. The industry is changing a lot. And then for buildings 5 in the office, a couple of 36 kilowatt batteries. In each of them, we've sized to go for 4 hours because that's a reasonable compromise between the cost and the resilience needed of the building. So, does that make sense?
I apologize if this has already been addressed. What is the scale of the loads, let's say for the PD building, and how the battery correlates to certain level for 4 hours?
At the police department?
Yeah.
And what's the question? I'm sorry.
So what's the size of the load that this battery is looking to carry?
What's the load?
Yes.
I mean, what was it from? So air conditioning, lighting, pumps and fans, things like that add up over each hour to different amounts of power drain. And
Well, I saw 40 kilowatts, and typically I see that as the power and the battery or the BESS system will be sized for the duration that it could carry out at maximum power. Right. So for instance, that will be 40 times 4, for that duration for the child. So I'm wondering that if that size battery can carry full capacity, and it's 40 kW, this is the maximum building.
Yeah, so you're right, that's 160 kilowatt hour battery capacity, and that's probably that's 160. That's probably 2 of these tables roughly. And it would carry the police department for probably a lot longer than 4 hours, because if we size it for 4 hours and we got some sunshine to recharge it, and that's the peak load, the average load is probably only half that. So that battery is going to carry the actual average load over a lot longer than 4 hours. Probably enough, certainly enough to get through any outages we've ever heard of, but if there's a disaster, a big storm, and you're out of power for weeks, then that's when you need some supplement.
But the feasibility report that's on the table, welcome to a copy. We conducted an energy audit of all the sites before sort of doing this recommendation. And I think the results of that audit are in the feasibility report showing the low demands for each building.
That would help.
Yeah.
But I couldn't pull it from the top of my head here.
Yeah, we calculated it as best we can.
As best we can.
The best.
No pun intended.
That's just the thing. Yeah. So theoretically, it's all in there.
And this is a draft, so there's blind spots that you, as an expert, see in the, oh, well, but as a resident, you bring in expertise. And this is the 18 point font version.
So it's easy to read.
Easier to read. That's what the American Council of Design told me to do. So I did.
You don't read that wrong, we have ordinary people before it's all
Yeah, but there's plenty of it. Whatever.
Yeah.
On what? Yes, and it's on town.org/microgrid.
So we propose one battery per building. We've said how they're scaled to the size of the demand and then the size. So we talked about that. Here's some costs. This is based on, we don't have a lot of information yet in the industry. There are a few standard suppliers, a lot of new suppliers, a lot of new technology coming on. So we're basing the cost partly on our own experience in designing and installing batteries and solar elsewhere, partly on national surveys, which are always more optimistic than the actual, and partly on a projection of where the industry may be going. So we're surely wrong in these numbers. I just don't know how wrong we are. But these are probably the best estimates we can get today. Hopefully, these costs will come down a lot. I mean, we may find that the total cost is half this. That's my hope. The thing that's driven up the costs, as you know, is supply chain disruptions, right? Partly because of the war in Ukraine, inflation, and higher interest rates. So the cost of all these things came down rapidly until about 2 years ago and then bottomed out and started climbing up again. And we don't, of course, know exactly where it's going, but we feel pretty safe that this is an outside number. Can do this project for $2 million. Both the solar and the battery system, and those repeat the sizes. Now, the next question, where does that money come from, right? So here's a mind-boggling chart. First of all, it's just list the facilities and the total. The measures are all solar, photovoltaics, and battery energy storage systems. The solar kilowatts, the battery kilowatts, the total estimated cost, there's that same number at the bottom, about $2 million. Now, the question is how much can be financed without any town money? How much can we cover from a combination of savings, because we'll reduce our utility bills, and incentives, which are built into various state programs, and participation in certain markets that we can sell environmental credits and so forth. We add up all those savings and other income and apply it so that if we borrowed that $2 million and applied all those things to it, we could pay back almost all of it within 10 years. We just modeled 10 years as a reasonable number. You could pay it all back without any contribution in probably 14 or 15 years. We want to look at what happens if we were to borrow money for 10 years and just pay it back out of savings and new income, right? No new money. Well, the answer is we pay back in 10 years $1.5 million, $1.6 million out of the $1.9 million. So there's a gap. We call that the resilience gap because it's mostly caused by the cost of batteries. We make the battery smaller, we can make that gap go away. In the assumptions we've used so far, that's the gap we end up with. Now, how do we pay for the gap? Well, we've already got 150,000 of it, right, from Mass Clean Energy Center for Winter Valley facilities. So we've got 300,000 to go or something. I don't think there's any question that we can get additional gap grants to fill in that gap. So our goal is to make this cash neutral for the town. We'd really like to be able to say to the people of the town, this is not going to cost you anything. And you're going to get environmental improvements, improvements to the building, savings, and resilience to important facilities and to folks who are in an environmental justice community. And the last column is, as you may have heard, there's a tax credit now available to cities and nonprofits. It used to be available only to tax-paying entities, obviously. But the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, made a new provision which allows cities and nonprofits to apply for the tax credit they would have got if they had paid taxes. It's called a direct payment. And that can be as much as 30%. So if we're smart and do this right, that means the amount financed is reduced. So the column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the amount financed without the ITC, and the last column is after we apply the ITC, we don't have to finance as much. And that would largely make the gap go away. I'm sorry, that's figured into this. So the gap is still there, but if we get the grants, we can make that 424,000 go away. Does that make any sense? That's the hardest slide.
And this is the simplest way we could present it, unfortunately. The pro formas are available sort of in detail in the report, and they will be also added as attachments in the final report for more sort of detailed working on data.
Yeah, so people will have an opportunity to ask questions, challenge this comment, suggest improvements as we go forward. It's an ongoing program, so. Yeah, so that's probably all you want me to say, Josh.
Generally, I mean, I think there's going to be more of a conversation given the nature of this room, but since we've just completed our greenhouse gas inventory for the town for the year 2022, just want to put the actual environmental impact into context, because we can now know what that context is, given that we have our inventory. It looks like, it's a relatively small portion of our overall emissions as a community, but it is not insignificant. Over the sort of 10-year period, we're seeing about 2,500 metric tons of carbon taken out from the solar panels being put onto our buildings. And I 574 gasoline-powered passenger vehicles driven for a whole year, as if they were wiped off the road. I mean, we couldn't install enough buses in town to do that sort of impact. Millions of pounds of coal no longer having to be burned in that equivalency. So there is a really appreciable impact that this will make to our impact on the environment, even if it is a small piece of the whole pie in terms of our general emissions. And David alluded to this, but we also wanted to talk about what comes next. For this project specifically, we're now in the sort of draft public review stage of our feasibility report. There's copies on the table there. The copies are also available digitally on townofmilton.org/microgrid. But that is open to the public, open to be edited and have questions asked. You can email me, you can email Jack, and he'll then email me. So just email me directly. But we're hoping to have this be iterative and incorporate feedback, so please don't hesitate to do so or encourage your friends to do so if you have folks who are financially minded or engineeringly minded. And this project ends with that final report, but this work does not. We applied and won $150,000 from the Mass Clean Energy Center, Mass CEC, to work specifically at Winter Valley to start doing all the sort of back-end permitting and nuance of how the financing works to make sure that residents will see impacts on their bills and be able to benefit as directly as possible from these installments. Because the challenge we've run into in other communities, and David can speak more on this later if you want to sort of get more details, is that folks in these kinds of communities are on utility allowances, and you won't see the benefits from increased energy efficiency on your bills. So there's a model out there that Clean Energy Solutions is pretty impressively leading the way on that can see direct cash benefits to those tenants. We'll see if that works at Winter Valley. That's why we're doing this continued study, but that's the hope, to see actual material benefits to folks, not just in the sort of abstract way that this makes us more resilient, but actually in the importance for talking about politics that this work sort of boils down to. So this process ends in a couple of weeks, but this larger work has a lot of legs left and a lot of money that we've not lost due to last week's vote still put into it, which is exciting. It's, I think, my only grant that I was awarded that hadn't been lost. So now just open floor for us to have questions. There's enough people here for it to be a really robust dialogue if you'd like it to be. Genevieve is here if you want to go on record for anything. And also not. But yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for just about a year now, and there's a lot more work still to do, but we've laid, I think, a really strong framework to do it successfully. And we've demonstrated that this can win us money from the state to progress forward and be as sort of financially responsible as we can be to, not have to go through a budget override, go through any sort of painful town meeting processes this way we can avoid it. Because that would be, my fiduciary responsibility as an employee in this town is to try to make that happen. Again, reports are on the table, reports are online. Any initial feedback or thoughts or questions about how to read the report or send feedback? I'm looking specifically at you, sir, because I think you're the only one who is not sort of part of this project team.
So this is all members of the project team?
Sarah is the executive director at Winter Valley. She's been involved long-term. I will say sort of unofficial queen of Winter Valley.
It's the secretary of the board.
Indeed.
I'm on the board, right?
So official in that case. And Jack and I work for the town, and David is our consultant. Genevieve is your
No, I don't have
pillar of.
any immediate questions just yet, but if there is guidance on how perhaps feedback can be given or review.
Yeah.
To
So-
the session.
At this webpage, townofmilton.org/microgrid, my contact info and Jack's contact info is on that. JLEE@townofmilton.org is, I think, some of the fewest amount of letters we have in one of our email addresses here at town.
For sure.
So we're also in town hall every day on the second floor, and you can come in and talk to us in
He
person.
can run, but he can't.
It can happen.
I'll do my best. I have a couple of plans on top of
You don't have any
bookshelves. And, we had folks come to some of our previous meetings, share their emails in a sign-in sheet. If you'd like to do that, you can be added to that little list, and then we'll send this out as well after the fact.
Certainly. So the implementation will be into balance, what does that look like? I'm thinking implementation as a project execution. Is that what
So the Mass DEC money does not go towards installing solar panels for BESS systems. It goes to the design of the financial model to provide residents with benefits from the installation of solar panels.
Yeah, there's a tricky stuff to do to get either the resilience benefit or the savings benefit to residents who pay their electric bill. Right. We put solar panels on the roof, we can't wire them to individual apartments. And even if we did, we wouldn't know how to share the amount. So in everywhere that I know of in the country, the only part of multifamily housing that gets the benefit of resilience and saving is in common areas and key circuits like the elevators, emergency lights, and so on. But the people who live in the apartments, if they pay their own electric bill, don't get either resilience or any savings. So to do that, we've got to solve a couple of tricky problems. One is an electrical problem of wiring and isolating the incoming electric service with a new current limiting panel so that we can feed, when there's an outage, we can feed all the apartments the same way the grid feeds it. So you can picture that wire coming into the building, cut it off, we put in what's called an automatic transfer switch, maybe you're familiar with. And that will switch all of the loads, all of the apartments from the grid to the battery in an outage. We can also do it when we want to do it. In other words, when the battery is full from the solar panels, we'd like to use that power to save the residents money. So we flip the switch voluntarily then, so that the power that's stored in the battery from the solar panels then goes to the apartments until the battery's discharged, and then we recharge it again. So that way, at least I can draw a picture that works. You'll see if we can make it work in practice, and that's the point of this grant, is to make sure we can do this. I'm pretty confident in it, but it'll be a big deal if we can do it. Sarah will have done something that hasn't been done anywhere else that I know of.
Chinatown, your work with Chinatown
Doing the
is a
same
very
thing in
similar
China.
project.
But I
It's
bet
not-
you guys will be faster.
So I'm thinking there's two prongs to that, right? So one is the resiliency prong,
Yeah.
and the second prong, end users cost savings, right? So
Right.
for multi-unit
Exactly.
apartment, you may have the main electrical with the both sides paying for that these days, 12 amps. I mean, so if you do have, a system like that, because they're individual meter. If the apartment cuts down its regular usage by 50%, that means that the entire facility, because the bill will be all. That could be one aspect. Is that what
Yeah,
you're describing?
Individuals reduce their electric use. The result would be the battery will last longer.
Wrong there, and they save as a result of the reduction.
Typically, in a general multifamily building, the challenge that we're trying to overcome is also the utility allowance element of it, where even if their usage goes down, their bill is still based off of a percentage of their income rather than on their energy efficiency.
It's,
Yeah.
the utility allowance is based on an average of 3 years. So the issue is, when you override the usage through solar, then when you recalculate the amount that they receive goes down.
Yeah,
So they don't, it's just a net zero for them.
thank you, Sarah.
So there's two issues. There's a utility allowance and there's a rent. There's a maximum amount of income they can pay for rent. And So that's another tricky thing we have to solve. And so the first task we wrote into the grant application was to work with Sarah and her residents and board in addressing these particular problems with real people who are experiencing them on a day-to-day basis. And those people are smarter than we are. So we have to do a lot of listening.
Yeah. Look, if I can peel back on the max amount based on income, right? So if you, I think I saw, environmental justice population, back on this as well. So if you're looking at that to be energy burden issue, where the total cost of energy is 30% of the income.
Yes.
Right, about.
I'm not sure what the utility allowance is calculated at.
Yeah, so that's one, right? So if you're looking to alleviate some of the energy costs by introducing renewable, I wonder if that will be a factor that could offset and give more of a benefit to the users. Because it will take some behavioral issues, right? You want to make sure that you have some smart systems in building, switching off lights. So they're changing their behavior to meet the collective goal. I wonder if there could be other instruments to leverage. The utilities is a different beast. They don't like to push around. So
Yeah.
it's more the regulated on it.
And part of the talking with residents is the other way around. We can teach them a lot about behavioral changes that will save energy. And in time we can consider, for example, replacing appliances that are inefficient. Winter Valley is remarkably efficient in terms of its energy use. We don't find the opportunities there or in the town buildings that we expect to find elsewhere. Yeah, but we want to look at all these things, yeah.
And then the models that we did were sort of fitted out, given sort of current energy efficiency of buildings. So any improvements we make for adding more LEDs in town hall or air source heat pumps will just make those solar panels generate even more than we need and sort of continue to outsize and generate more credits if we get to that point. So everything will be beneficial in terms of behavior changes, but in terms of the way that the buildings currently use power and the users sort of act, that is the system we've sized for. But yeah. Well, I love talking to people in construction, and I've got to talk to the vast majority of people many times about this. And I'm really grateful that you stuck around and have joined, because I keep eating so much cheese after these forums, and my wife just is not having it. So really appreciate all of you coming and helping make her life a little easier.
What do you think your timeline is?
So for the feasibility report, this is a draft. We set aside a full year for this project and got started in April of 2023. So we set aside 2 months for this feedback report to be finalized. I don't anticipate it taking that long. So less than a month, about, I'd say give us until the end of March, but I don't think we'll need that. If feedback is light over the next week, I haven't received any feedback from the site being that's up, $10 million/microgrid report. That was posted on our social media. So if feedback is not really received, we may both sort of wait longer to sort of close that feedback time period that we're working on, or have a shorter period of the draft to final. So hopefully it'll come out in the wash in about a month. And then the Mass EC process, that funding is pretty long. as far as it goes. I think we had a meeting with the Energy Center last Thursday. I think these are 2-year grants.
Yeah, they're allowing 3 years and the reports are spread out over 18 months.
Yeah. I don't anticipate this sort of slice of the project to be a 3-year project. I think we sort of timed it out for 18 months. So 2 months, give or take, but we've got a lot of leeway if it goes longer.
And is Climate Action Plan Committee, are they in your loop?
They are in the loop. I met with them last Thursday in this very room. You can almost hear them. And they're familiar with this work. Most of them are, experts in the field relatively. One loss on the committee was their co-chair, Tracy Redmond, was recently hired at the Department of Public Utilities. And so being on the committee presented an ethics commission kind of conflict of interest. So despite losing that expertise on the Climate Action Planning Committee, knowing someone at DPU who's going to be regulating a project like this is actually a really good connection for us to have for the success of this work, even if she's not on that committee. Something that is related but not specifically tied to this project is the committee's and my department's continued advocacy for the specialized stretch code. So that will be a sort of higher level base energy code for our buildings. The stretch code as it is, we're a stretch code community, applies to new builds as well as renovations over 1,000 square feet with a couple of sort of nuances and exceptions, but specialized code is just new construction and basically sets net zero for new homes being built, new multifamily being built, new commercial and new municipal buildings. So it's not just going to be the single family home owner and the buyer who is affected by this, it's every single building in town.
Including the firehouse?
That is already built. But that firehouse, the firehouse had to conform to the stretch code, which was a lot more stringent than the base code, and is one of only a handful of new buildings we've seen since 2011 when we became stretch code. So the newer buildings we get in town, and now with bigger additions, which we've seen is becoming the norm, all of those will have to be far more efficient and in terms of the way the buildings work, and likely need to see solar photovoltaics, especially if it's what we call a mixed fuel building, which is anyone that has, on-site combustion in a gas stove or in a water boiler. They will have to set up their own on-site solar to offset that. So solar deployment in town will increase regardless of the status of this project. Yeah, if that stretch code is approved. As I've been town meeting, we'll be hosting an event April to inform folks, but I've been presenting it at the select board, at the planning board, and at the climate action committee. We'll be at the warrant committee, next Monday, the 26th, to talk about it as well. Speaking of things, my wife doesn't like evening meetings. So I appreciate your brevity this evening. We won't go more than that. Any last thoughts, questions, concerns, comments? Well, I should have suggested you bring Tupperware. Okay. Otherwise, I can let you get back, fight through the cold.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you, David, for coming all the way, and thank you all for coming out.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
People demand in-person meetings, but if hybrid and virtual works better for folks, we can keep moving this to the Zoom type sessions as well.
Mix is usually good.
I like to do so. It's hard to co-manage the hybrid in a setting like this. So try to do one or the other. Cool. Thank you all.
Thank you, got it.
Thank you. I'm glad I can stay home.
Yeah.